Facebook, on YouTube, via the LBC Twitter feed if you'd like to, and we'd love to have your questions as well. Otherwise it's going to be a bit of a boring hour. 0345 6060 973. That's the number you have to call here on LBC.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Ian Dale on LBC.
For some reason, I just called Lucy Dyer. I don't know why that, because I don't know anyone called Lucy Dyer. Lucy Denyer is Deputy Comment Editor at the Daily Telegraph. That's a good start, isn't it? Right, welcome to you all. Let's get down to business and take the first question from Will, who is in Oxford Circus. Hello, Will.
Hi, how you doing?
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I've been cycling around between all the different Extinction Rebellion protest sites for the whole day.
You know how to have a good time.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Out in the sun, making history, my first time activist work. It's been really brilliant and sort of traumatic at the same time, watching people being arrested, but there's this amazing positive sense of joy and the fact that things are changing, or this is how things can change, and it's exciting stuff. And I guess, this is the biggest existential threat to humanity. This affects everyone. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how rich you are, poor. It doesn't matter your class, where you're coming from, colour of your skin, religion. Everyone is included in this.
I need a question, Will.
Yeah. Why isn't everyone coming and joining us to do this? It's amazing.
I'm at work, mate.
All right, well, let's start off with Matt Forde. So why haven't you been on it?
I've been busy today, and I think that's a reality of a lot of political protests is... unless it's something that you are hugely animated about, the reality is you get on with your daily life. And I wasn't gonna pass up the opportunity to be on Ian Dale's Cross Question for the small matter of saving the planet. I'm sorry, I've got my priorities right, and I'm glad I'm going to be here for the next hour.
But I mean, you are, shall we say, broadly on the centre left.
Yes.
I mean, to use a phrase, a Blairite.
Yes.
Shouldn't you be more exercised by this issue?
I support them. I think it's a good idea. I mean, I don't agree with causing criminal damage or anything like that. But whatever I think of the tactics of the group, climate change is a major issue facing the planet, and if people want to spend their own time trying to educate other people and campaign on it, I think it's a good thing. And just in general, I respect people's right to protest in this country, and I always... Even if I disagree with the protest, take a little heart from the fact that people still do it.
Do you think the way that they're doing it is actually helping the cause, though? Because, I mean, disrupting a lot of people's lives. I mean, they're chaining themselves to Jeremy Corbyn's fence. I can't quite see how that's going to change anyone's views on climate change.
Yeah, well, I'm quite glad they changed themselves to Jeremy. I'm glad they targeted Corbyn as well, because he's influential in these debates, and they shouldn't go easy on him as they might be inclined to do. But on the whole, protest has to be disruptive if it's going to be effective. So I don't mind a bit of disruption. I don't mind having to change my travel plans to some extent. It really annoys me when people do stuff at airports, because I think people have saved up a lot of time to go on, and money to go on holiday. So that I find that slightly heartbreaking, but. Protesting outside Downing Street, blocking Oxford Circus. I think it's quite... And you know what? It was great today because you could just walk through these places. And it's lovely being able to walk through the centre of London without traffic. So a glimpse into the future, maybe.
Lucy Denyer.
I agree with Matt in that, right to protest, very important. But I would question the purpose of these protests.
Just to save the planet.
It is to save the planet.
What better cause could there be?
I think it's very important. But if you look at the UK's contribution to carbon emissions, it's less than 1%, I think is the figure. The real culprits are the likes of China and Russia, and the government has already made massive commitments to reducing carbon emissions. So I just question what the protesters want the government to do.
Well, they want the government to decarbonise to have zero carbon by 2025 in 6 years' time, which would effectively mean that every aircraft would have to be brought to a standstill, we'd all be forced to abandon our cars, and all the cows in the country would have to be killed.
Which makes me think that we're going back to sort of pre-industrial levels of poverty.
Exactly, but that is, in a sense, what's behind this. This is... In reality, this is an anti-capitalist movement, isn't it? It's the successor to the Occupy movement.
It's anti-modernity. These people hate modernity. They have a weird Rousseau-esque illusion that the world before man came along was beautiful, untroubled, magnificent, and man especially, but occasionally women too, do everything that's wicked and horrible. This is willful primitivism. It's silly, it's self-indulgent. You listen to the chap who rang in now with an accent almost as cut glass as mine. You could see the pound signs lined up behind him. You knew he was on a
We'll
private...
get back to Will in a moment.
You knew he was on a private income. You knew he'd been to a grand public school. You knew he was almost certainly even more Oxbridge than I am. This is ultra-indulgent, upper-middle-class wank. Let's call it by its absolute proper name. It is indefensible. It is silly. As Lucius said, we contribute a tiny, tiny proportion to global warming. You've also got to look at what India and China and the rest are doing. They're trying to rescue their people from absolute, utter misery, which the world of man and woman and children was before industrialization. And unless they recognise that, they are simply fools, and I would herd them together in the middle of Trafalgar Square and keep them there in pre-industrial conditions for 2 or 3 days and watch how these pampered souls reacted, deprived of their moisturiser.
I must remind you, David, this is a family-friendly show.
I use an absolute... the kind of word that Matt employs over breakfast.
Okay.
I use a lot worse.
Yeah.
I'm sure. There you are.
Hannah Peake from the Women's Equality Party.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to me that David is fully in support of an overthrow of government by the people, except when it's a cause he doesn't believe in. I think we should be celebrating the fantastic protests I've been enjoying myself. We should celebrate them, but also recognise that this is kind of a symptom, much like Brexit, of a failure of government, that it has become so utterly disconnected from its people that they are having to take action to assert their own interests. And the actual part that nobody talks about that they are demanding is a citizens' assembly, a democratic space in which to assert their interests and discuss those. Well, questionable whether it's a citizens' assembly given the representation of women, ethnic minorities, working class people. It's a form of government, and it's a government that right now is entirely distant from its people.
Well, it's actually selected by the people, whereas a citizens' assembly, I mean, how on earth would you select something like that?
Well, there are lots of different ways to select. Probably ones that are preferable to a first past the post voting system, which excludes any form of minority group that is trying to assert its interests. I mean, our democratic system, our voting system is completely antiquated. It doesn't work. It doesn't leave space for groups like this who want to make their point, make change, make crucial change. Like what Will's talking about here is absolutely critical. And we don't work out our responsibility based on our contribution to a problem. That's not leadership. That's a race to the bottom.
Okay. But this is silly. What can Britain do? What you're doing, now let's actually face this, Hannah. You're producing a version of the white man's burden. Because of our extraordinary imperial past, it's our duty to be better than everybody else. We've got to set the example. This seems to me to be a form of absolute racism.
David, I don't think you need to. I don't think you need to set any more examples. I think you need to move out the way. The reason this protest is centred on capitalism is because that's what's at its core, and capitalism thrives on the exploitation of our environment and women. So, of course, rather than putting that burden on you, we're saying just move out of the way and we'll do a different job.
You are so pig or sow ignorant. Let's get the gender right.
David, come on.
It's true, because capitalism has liberated women. It's got women out of the home. It's given women jobs. It's given women access to the professions. It has liberated and freed them. It's freed them from the biology. How on earth can you be just so stupid?
It's okay to recognise the contributions that capitalism has made to women's equality whilst also recognising the ways in which it relies on the exploitation of women. We can have complex, nuanced discussions, David. We don't have to always resort to saying that it's either this or that. It's done that. That person's a hero.
You began by saying that capitalism enslaved women. Now, that is a statement.
I said it relies on the exploitation of both women and the environment, which is how they're connected.
Women... But sorry, I've given you repeated examples as to how it is capitalism, economic growth that frees. It is poverty.
And poverty is one of the biggest consequences of capitalism.
Don't be a fool.
Well, you could argue that capitalism has played a huge role in alleviating world poverty.
It has indeed, and I'm able to maintain that it can do both, and that we can place restraints and regulation.
Let's go back to our caller, Will, in Oxford Circus. And Will, would you like to defend your background?
No, I think this includes everyone. I've given up my job.
I was right.
Well, I mean, like, sorry.
Well, Eileen, would you like to crank the accent up a little bit more? Get the vowels.
Hang on. Let Will have his say.
Okay. This morning, I was, for the first time, and I thought it was pretty hard, reduced to tears, listening to someone from Mozambique and then followed by someone from Bangladesh explain about how climate change and ecological collapse was killing their family members. And it actually made me cry, and I didn't think I was going to. And it was a very, very difficult thing to hear. And if I've been granted the privilege of being a white, well-educated male in central London who is capable of giving up time to do this, then I'm using my privilege effectively by being out here to make the changes that that women used to get the vote. The tactics are similar. So it's not capitalism didn't give women the vote. That was direct action, direct non-violent action, which is what's taking place on the streets. It's incredibly inspirational.
The First World War gave women the vote.
To talk about capitalism, Mark Carney and the head of the French central bank both said today that the global financial system faces an existential threat from climate change, and that we all need to act to raise the bar to avoid catastrophe. These aren't poshos, they're not hippies, whatever you want to call them, David. These are the leaders of the financial sector, and they are saying very, very clearly that we all need to do something right now, and that is why I'm on the street.
Okay.
So many people
All right.
Good for you, Will.
Will, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, that was a fairly heated start to Cross Question. Goodness knows what we're going to talk about. And I've just seen what we're going to talk about next. The temperature's going to go up a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. It's 8:15.
LBC.
Helen's Homecoming Lamb.
It's a lot quieter around here since the boys went off to college. Sunday roast was always the highlight. All the family around the table for my roast leg of lamb with salsa verde crust.
Hi, Mum. We brought a couple of pals back. Is that all right?
Yeah, it's good to have them back for a couple of weeks.
Because families seem to double at Easter, selected legs of grass-fed lamb are now half price. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco. Selected stores excludes Express. Was £11 per kilo, now $5.50 per kilo. Offer ends 23rd of April.
If you're considering dental implants, come to TDC. Our award-winning Smile in a Day team can transform your smile with a full set of implants and natural-looking fixed teeth all in one day. About 3 months later, we'll exchange the teeth for a final permanent set. Visit smileinaday.co.uk.
Some things should never be seen together, like socks and sandals, or grown-ups and micro-scooters. But your bank accounts, that's another matter. The NatWest app lets you see balances and transactions from your current accounts in one trusted place, even if they're with other banks. We're always thinking of new ways to make managing your money easier. Search NatWest Easier Banking. NatWest, we are what we do.
Backed by current account switch guarantee. App eligibility criteria applies. Selected UK banks. You must be registered for other banks' online banking.
At Argos, have a crackin' Easter. Save 20% on home and furniture with thousands of products included. Plus, get a free £10 voucher when you spend £100. With Argos, you're good to go. Offers end 23rd of April, subject to availability. Selected lines. Offer excludes nursery furniture. Voucher offer valid when you spend £100 or more. Excludes gift card purchases.
If you're an EU citizen living in the UK, you will need to apply to the EU Settlement Scheme. This means that the rights you currently have will be protected after the UK leaves the EU. The scheme is fully open and you have plenty of time to apply. It is free. To find out more and to apply, visit gov.uk/EU Settlement Scheme. Irish citizens or those with valid indefinite leave don't need to apply.
The feel of hot rubber on tarmac. The smell of petrol in your nostrils. High-quality adventures need high-quality tyres. Michelin tyres. Tyres that run for miles. Tyres that fun for miles. A tyre that makes other tyres cry when they look in the mirror. The type of...
Yeah, we've only got 30 seconds. That'll do.
For long-lasting performance, choose Michelin tyres. Available from the experts at QuickFit. Get a free tyre safety check at your local centre now.
Looking to brighten up your garden? At Wickes, we have a stunning range of new bedding plants, with fresh deliveries coming to your local Wickes store every week. Plants start from only £2.
Cross Question with Ian Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
18 minutes past 8. You're listening to Cross Question. So far on Twitter and text, there seems to be a huge demand for a David Starkey show on LBC every week. Well, there you go.
That's already said.
We
on Talk Radio. Yes.
We are with Dr. David Starkey, Matt Ford, comedian, host of the Political Party podcast, which if you've never listened to, is one of the best podcasts out there. Hannah Peake is from the Women's Equality Party, one of the best equality parties out there. Lucy Denyer is deputy comment editor at The Telegraph, one of the best newspapers in the country, for which she asked me to write occasionally, so that's nice. Right, let's go to your
Enough
calls.
back-scratching,
Exactly.
Yes.
Omar is in Manchester. Omar, what's your question, please?
Hi, Ian. Basically, I wanted to know if the panel thought that David Lammy had an interview on Sunday morning on the Andrew Marr show, where he called out, the likes of Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg, people who are bringing this country or steering it in the direction of the far right, and absolutely called them out for what they are. And I wanted to know if your panel thought that the comments that he made and the way that he did it, far from it being too much, he didn't go far enough, and it makes him the next Labour leader in waiting.
Oh, well, that's quite an assertion. Hannah, what do you think?
I think what we're seeing, sadly, is him calling out a very obvious pattern in British politics where the mainstream parties, the two mainstream parties, I'd include his own in that, have normalised and taken on, one of the reasons we created the Women's Equality Party was because we saw an opportunity in what had happened with UKIP, where instead of the parties resisting what was going on, resisting their toxic messaging, they contorted themselves to look like UKIP. That is still the case. We're about to have Labour and the Conservatives take seats in Europe with the intention of leaving. So if you needed any better example, and what's happened here from, the sort of like right back in the roots of British jobs for British workers, all of the anti-immigration narrative that has been adopted, it travels with its companions racism, misogyny, homophobia.
That make Gordon Brown a member of the far right? Because that was a phrase that
it doesn't make him a member of the far right. It means that the political elite, the old parties, have not done enough to challenge these dangerous narratives, and instead they have contorted themselves to look like UKIP. They have adopted it, normalised it, made it acceptable. And David Lammy was calling out also with the ERG. I mean, as he said, he was calling out Jacob Rees-Mogg, who has been known to share far-right content. Wrapped up in the ideology of the ERG are things, we talk about modernity and a lack of appetite for modernity. There are things like anti-abortion perspectives, anti-LGBT rights.
When he invokes Hitler and the Nazis in this kind of language, no one seriously thinks that Jacob Rees-Mogg is a Nazi. Doesn't it devalue? If your family were victims of the Nazis, I think you'll find that a pretty insulting thing to do.
I think we sadly no longer need to only reference the Nazis as a cross comparison for far-right behaviour. It is on the rise in every country in Europe, in our own country, and there are plenty of other comparisons that would work just as well. But the point that David Lammy was making at its core is right, which is some of the behaviours directly from the people involved in ERG, as well as some of the messaging that has been adopted by it, and some of its policy commitments, frankly, are so far right that it's becoming really, really dangerous.
David Starkey.
My dear, what a delicate flower you are if you think anything that Jacob Rees-Mogg has said is far right. His position on abortion is nothing to do with his politics, it's to do with his religion. I disagree with it profoundly, but I think held as a religious belief, it is shared throughout most of Christian history, so end of story. I think the more interesting question, we were asked to comment on Lammy. Let's comment on Lammy. I think it just shows that Lammy has gone mad. It is perfectly clear that the whole Remainer elite, very significant numbers of them, have been driven mad by the rejection of their position, the behaviour of Andrew Adonis, of Matthew Parris, who used to be a perfectly sane, chatty journalist, now writes...
And still is.
Yes, but on one issue he has clearly got... And he admits
but this is on both sides. Brexit derangement syndrome, I call it. And it happens to people like Alistair Campbell, Andrew Adonis on one side, but there are plenty of examples on the other side.
Well, there's a very interesting survey.
Andrew Bridgen, Mark Francois, need I say more?
To an extent. But there's a rather interesting fact that everybody who is a Leaver knows Remainers, because Leavers are very evenly scattered over the country. Remainers are densely crowded in London, which is an obvious sociological reason that Remainers think that they are the only people with the right opinion, and they have this profound, very un-leftish, though they would call themselves leftish, tribalism. But let's look more carefully at Lammy, because I think the general extremism of Lammy's language, and did you actually look at what he was wearing? A black jacket with a collarless. Let me explain. With a collarless shirt, and he looked extraordinarily un-English. What he was trying to do, Lammy is Americanizing himself. He had a session at the Harvard Law School, and he is adopting the same sort of language as Al Sharpton. The same kind of language which has driven American black politics into the sand. It's the language of violence and victimhood, and it's disgraceful.
Why are we so concerned with the comparison with the ERG and the Nazis when they chose to compare themselves to the KKK with their title, the Grand Wizards? That was no accident of language. It was absolutely not an accident of language.
To be fair on that, it's never been established that any one of them did coin that language. It was repeated by a journalist. But nobody's ever sourced that.
Precisely.
And yet they came out to defend why they had said it.
Look,
did they?
Yeah.
I think there is no evidence for that. So that is mere hearsay. This is the kind of Twitter sphere which has eliminated truth. This is one of the real dangers. And we saw it with the crucifying of Roger Scruton. The Twitter sphere eliminates truth. Let's just go back, though, to this business of the dangers of what Lammy is doing. The point is that the history of blacks in Britain is absolutely different from the history of blacks in America. There has never been slavery in Britain. There has never been institutional.
There were plenty of British slave traders.
There were slave traders, no, but in Britain, the moment you stepped into Britain, you were free. There is no history of institutionalised, legalised discrimination. There was plenty of extra-legal discrimination, and this means for a completely different history. And what certain types of the black leadership are trying to do, Ian. And so this is a genuine, serious, deeply felt point. They're selling a false history.
Okay.
There's a wonderful new book, and I'm going to give it a plug, by Miranda Kaufman, who looks at blacks in Tudor England. And what it shows is that they were accepted as fellow citizens. There's a wonderful incident even where one of them publicly flogged a white man.
Ian, we honestly can't give much more time to this.
Well, look,
so are you objecting to the fact that something serious?
I'm going to bring in Matt Ford. I'm going to bring in. He's talking about a book, which, if you've seen it, you can make your own comments on it. Matt Ford.
I think white people are really worried about the way Brexit's going as well, and to just categorise David Lammy for his race, I don't think is particularly helpful. We all live in a society where Nazi comparisons are thrown around too easily by all sides. However, I walked through Parliament Square the other week when there was that Leave Means Leave rally, and although I'm sure there was some very well-meaning, gentle folk there was a dark and sinister edge to it, and it really worried me seeing Nigel Evans and so-called mainstream politicians coming out and addressing that crowd and not having the guts to say, actually, some of these people do not represent what we stand for. And there was Tommy Robinson was obviously just around the corner. There was a violent edge to it. There was an aggressive edge to it. And I really worry that in not wanting to call everyone Nazis, which is entirely, a noble aim, we are actually in danger of going too far the other way and not calling out serious threats from the far right when we see it. And
do you class Jacob Rees-Mogg and the ERG as far right? Because Hannah obviously does.
I think some of them have far right characteristics.
Like what?
If Jacob Rees-Mogg is sharing AFD tweets on Twitter, then I think he has to think about what sort of information he's sharing.
Why?
And I think part of the problem with the far right is we always imagine it's skinhead, aggressive, direct action type stuff. There is a soft underbelly on the right that is conversational, that allows these ideas to flourish. And if we don't challenge it in those places...
Sorry, you were asked a question. What are the ideas of the ERG or Jacob Rees-Mogg that any sensible person who knew anything about political thought would characterise as far right? You see, because I'm on the right, I'm quite interested in what is now thought to be acceptable.
Do you think that you're on the far right? Because many people would accuse you of that.
Idiotic. I am very confused, for example, about the whole doctrine of human rights, like you, Ian, being gay. I benefited from aspects of that liberation of the 60s. I think clearly it's gone too far. But how do you draw the line in the sand? I am a passionate believer in democracy. I do not believe in human equality, save as a notional concept, because manifestly we're not free, we're not equal. And so on and so on. I believe in the acceptance of facts, like the number of chromosomes determines what sex you are, and other such little details.
Well,
like that.
Let's move on. Lucy
Maybe
Denyer,
they're hard right positions.
Lucy Denyer, David Lammy. I mean, he does seem to have become particularly, shall we say, bombastic in recent months.
Al
Sharpton, if you watch him on any TV interview or a panel programme, he's got one mode at the moment, and it's kind of ranty, and he didn't used to be like that. Why do you think he's going over the top in his language?
I do, actually. I don't think it's necessary. I think we have all become so enraged and so divided, and I think that's one of the most dangerous things that's happening at the moment. And I think, however distasteful you might find the views of the ERG, however single-minded you might think them, they are campaigning or working towards taking Britain out of the EU, because that's what the country voted for and what both political parties stood on a manifesto to deliver. And many of them voted for Mrs May's withdrawal deal. Essentially, that's what they're trying to do. I don't think you can compare that to the genocide of Jews. I just don't.
Have we got to a point, though, where the whole concept of Brexit is seen as a right-wing project? I mean, I had this argument with Adam Bolton on Sky the other day, where he was trying to maintain that it was only the far right that supported Brexit. I said, well, that would come as a great surprise to 5 million Labour voters.
Absolutely.
I think it has become, as you say, characterised as a far right issue, and I think you're right that it's.
But 75%,
the people who voted in the
sorry, just 1 second, a quick fact. 75% of constituencies voted for Brexit. This is the point. Huge majorities were built up in London, the peripheries, Manchester, Leeds, the other big cities, in favour of Remain.
Scotland, Northern Ireland.
Scotland, Northern Ireland, but within England.
Well, we might come on to a bit more on Brexit a little bit later, but Hannah, final word to you on this.
Well, I was going to say, sort of acting as though the Leave campaign is a victim of being presented as a right-wing campaign. It might surprise you to hear that I myself considered voting Leave. It was the first time in a voting booth in my life that I've really, really hesitated as to what to do. But this presentation that this is something that happened to Leave, shall we look at the use of data in the Leave campaigns? Shall we look at the micro-targeting that went on?
But I don't think
the narratives that they
blame
adopted,
that on the ERG.
the anti-immigration sentiment that was brought, the divisive language, the lies, all of that is what has cast it as a right-wing and in some cases toxic right-wing campaign. I don't think they are victims of that. I think they are the architects of it.
Right, we're going to move on. Thank you very much. David Starkey, Matt Ford, Hannah Peake, Lucy Denyer here with me until 9 o'clock, taking your calls 0345 6060 973. It's 8:31. Josh Coop has the LBC News headlines.
And in the last half an hour, we've heard at least 28 people are believed to have died after a bus carrying tourists crashed on the Portuguese island of Madeira. Local media say up to 50 people were on board the coach, which left the road and overturned earlier this afternoon. A man's been stabbed to death in northeast London. It happened in Stoke Newington just before 6 o'clock tonight, hours after protesters marched in Westminster calling for the government to take urgent action over knife crime. And climate change protesters are continuing to cause disruption across London as they block roads and bridges for a third day. More than 300 demonstrators have already been arrested as part of the action organised by campaign group Extinction Rebellion. LBC weather dry and clear across much of the UK tonight. Mist and fog spreading into eastern areas. Any cloud around tomorrow morning will clear, leaving a dry, fine and warm day at a high of 21 degrees.
This is LBC.
This is a luxury escape to Barbados. Snorkeling in beautifully secluded bays, enjoying pristine sandy beaches and savouring locally caught seafood. This is the ultimate USA road trip, taking in the Pacific coast, verdant canyons and national parks bursting with wildlife. These are travel bag holidays, packed with 40 years of experience. To book, visit us in store or at travelbag.co.uk.
Don't you just love an Easter egg hunt? Trouble is, I always forget where I've hidden them. Not to worry, I've tracked down a few more at Co-op. This Easter, you can get 3 large eggs for £10, and that includes Cadbury Whisper, Maltesers Teasers, and Galaxy Golden. Maybe I won't hide these. We'll just share them instead. Selected eggs only while stocks last. See participating stores for details.
Looking to brighten up your garden? At Wicks, we have a stunning range of new bedding plants, with fresh deliveries coming to your local Wicks store every week. Plants start from only £2.
At Argos, have a cracking Easter. Save 20% on home and furniture with thousands of products included. Plus, get a free £10 voucher when you spend £100. With Argos, you're good to go. Offers end 23rd of April, subject to availability. Selected lines. Offer excludes nursery furniture. Voucher offer valid when you spend £100 or more. Excludes gift card purchases.
Unlock the city with the new Range Rover Evoque. Know your side streets. From your inner city beats. Know your underbelly and where to fill your belly.
Your lamb, madam.
Know your north from your south. Live for the city with the new Range Rover Evoque. Land Rover, above and beyond.
Think you're tough? Nah, I ain't talking about you, sunshine. I'm talking about your email password. You need to get yourself a strong, separate email password. Something unique, like 3 random words you're not using anywhere else. Because if your email gets hacked, you're in big trouble. Hackers can use it to nick your identity. Then you'll be out the creek without a paddle, and no one wants to see that. Be cyber aware. Learn more at cyberaware.gov.uk.
We're all busy people, which is why when it comes to making a PPI claim, although you can complain directly to your lender or the Financial Ombudsman for free, thousands of people have let the claims guys do all the donkey work for them. So even if you can't find any paperwork, or you're not certain you have PPI, make sure you get the claims guys to start your claim before the deadline on the 29th of August 2019. Just text ANSWER to 66777. Text ANSWER to 66777 now.
The Claims Guys.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Ian Dale. Tweet at LBC.
25 to 9 here on LBC. Remember, you can watch us on YouTube. You can watch us via the LBC website or the Facebook page or our Twitter feed. Let's go to our next caller for David Starkey, Matt Ford, Hannah Peake and Lucy Denyer. It's Stephen, who's a new caller in Nottingham. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Ian. Hello, panel.
Hello.
I'd just like to ask, given the recent protests about LGBT education in primary schools, do you believe that we're even more morally obligated to give children an alternative, positive or neutral perspective on gay relationships, especially if they live in a religious family where they're taught that gay relationships are sinful? Do you see it as our duty to protect them?
Well, we had the National Education Union coming out yesterday to say there should be compulsory relationships lessons in primary schools. Lucy Denyer, what are the Telegraph readers saying about this, dare I ask?
I think they're quite mixed, actually. I think that they're probably more mixed than you'd expect them to be. I think the concern a lot of the time is not with whether schools are teaching, gay relationships are fine, as much as schools teaching about relationships full stop, because I think a lot of readers feel that is a complicated, sensitive area. You've got a big class full of children. Different children are going to be at different kind of emotional, mature levels. Some may be able to take on some things that others can't. I have 3 children, 2 of them are primary school aged. I look at them in relation to their peers, and they're all at different stages. And I think that's the discomfort that a lot of people have with this, as opposed to the content of the lessons per se. At least I'd sort of hope that was their concern.
The issue tends to be that people fear that this is not relationships education, it's sex education. And nobody in their right mind would want a 6-year-old learning about sex, whether it's gay or straight, at that age, I would have thought. And then the other worry that people have is that, well, it might persuade them to be gay, because people still seem to believe, Hannah, that you can be persuaded.
I think it'd be a very hard thing to persuade anyone of if you've had any experience of coming out. I'm finding this kind of this story has come up a lot, and this conversation just seems to go round and round and round. I find it quite challenging. I've just in the last 2 months had a child in a gay relationship, and thinking of this through that lens, thinking of him going to school, and either his education not being taught in a way that recognises, celebrates teaches him about gay relationships, that would just be excluded from his curriculum, or that other children will leave the room when it comes up, is just an extraordinarily painful thing to consider, and it absolutely smacks of Section 28 days, because at the end of the day, you know, and I'm sure people say it's not the same as Section 28. You know, it wasn't that you couldn't promote gay relationships. That was what that was about, and it's up to schools. But the difference doesn't matter for the kid.
You've got Labour MPs in Birmingham effectively doing the equivalent of Section 28 by supporting the Muslim parents in Birmingham in their quest to have these lessons banned in those schools. It's incredible, isn't it?
I think it is incredible, and I think you know, a lot of people seem to think that you know, sort of gay people have become accepted at the point of gay marriage, and it really, you start to unpick how people think about this, that they still think it is something you can be persuaded of, and for a lot of those people never to have had the experience of not being represented, you know, something women experience all the time of not seeing themselves in textbooks. They can go through a whole bookshelf at school and not find a single person that represents their life. It is an extension of that, and it's really sad. And I think, you know, the religion argument I struggle with, because actually this could be done in a way that is inclusive of religion, that celebrates the tenets of love, respect, tolerance, not even tolerance, and could be based on that and celebrating both, rather than this antagonism. But also we're giving so much time to what is actually a handful of parents who have organised in one school in Birmingham. I think the majority,
quite a lot.
I think the majority of the country is behind this happening. But also the hilarious thing about this, because the Women's Equality Party pushes for these lessons to be taught by specialists, and including specialists, young people themselves. It's slightly hilarious, this idea, like what will come out of this curriculum will be so far behind where young people are at and what they're doing. This like very careful, structured relationship thing. You can sort of imagine it. Like, get the blackboards back out and we'll do some drawings. Like, children are so far ahead. They are using technology to discover this stuff themselves. So shutting it down is not an option anyway.
Matt Ford.
For all the progress I think we've made as a society sometimes, I mean, I'm not surprised that there are sort of regressive views out there, but to think that educating people would sort of introduce the idea of homosexuality as an option to an otherwise heterosexual person, it's as ludicrous as thinking that a gay person can be turned straight by education. So I consider myself to be a sort of modern, progressive individual. Sometimes I have to remind myself there are some very different people in the country. There are some very different views. And sometimes those people can be won over by reason. I really would not... I just feel deeply uncomfortable that you would judge anyone based on their sexuality, and as a result, then educate people early.
David Starkey, how would your life have been different had you had these relationship lessons when you were 7, 8 years old, do you think?
Well, I'd actually known what homosexuality was, and being at a state school, I might well have done something. Indeed, it would have been very useful propaganda. I might well have done something about it. I mean, remember, you're not quite as old as I am. In fact, you're much younger. But in my day, if you were at that sort of standard state boys' school, there was simply no language. There were no words that. And it's very important we cast ourselves back to that world. I mean, I had 2 doctors. In retrospect, it is perfectly clear that they were in a lesbian relationship, or at least one would swear so. You know, they had hair parted in the middle, they wore tweed skirts, collars and ties, dandruff on the shoulders.
That does not make them lesbian, does it?
But, sorry, they were pure well of loneliness. Nobody said a word, because the language wasn't there. What we've done, and it is very important we recognise this, by putting the language of sexuality so into the public domain, there are no longer people who are, committed bachelors, or whatever that phrase used to be in the Times.
Musical.
Musical was another one. It would have. I suspect it would have made a difference. Whether primary school, I would not do it at primary school.
Even just relationship education. We're not talking about sex education
but
here.
in fact, it changes gear. It goes beyond that.
But surely, hang on a second.
You asked me a question. Let me answer it.
But I just want to put this into a bit of context, because surely the point here is that education has to move with society, and we live in a society now which is very different when you and I are at school.
As we were discussing.
Most children would have had a mother and a father as parents. There'd be the odd one where there's somebody divorced, but that would have been an exception. Now, in any primary school class, I would suggest to you that there are children who have a single parent, whether it's male or female. There will be children who have gay parents, whether it's male or female, and there'll be the usual sort of male mother and father.
And in large parts of Birmingham, there will be huge phalanxes of Muslim children to whose parents all this is an abomination.
Yes, absolutely.
And those who sing the virtues of an immigrant society, and a society that encourages immigration, that rejects the notion of conscious assimilation, that celebrates difference, well, I'm afraid you're reaping what you sow. We're not one society, Ian. We are several. And
we
they
are
deeply...
we have to aim to be one society,
no, we
don't we?
Sorry, our public policy does not aim for one society. On the contrary...
Well, what does it aim for, then?
It seems to me for tolerated difference. This is why London works. If you actually look at how people live, most of us actually live in semi-ghettos. We mingle in the public sphere. We mingle when we're in a taxi cab. In a London cab, you mingle with a right-on white man, right-off white man. When you're in an Uber, an immigrant. In these different worlds. If you go into Boots, you will have an unusually large percentage of hijab-wearing girls behind the desk. And we all rub along, but our homes, our lives are different.
You're using a lot of stereotypes there, aren't you?
Stereotypes exist for a reason.
Well,
up to a point. Ian, why has the protest arisen? The protest has arisen for the reasons that I'm telling you.
Well, the protest has arisen for the reasons that Hannah said, because it's to do with religion.
Exactly. Yeah. But I'm sorry, we have Muslims are an extremely powerful political bloc, which is very heavily represented in the Labour.
And yet, as an atheist, you would support the idea of different religions being taught in schools, presumably, all the way up to primary age.
No. My view is that the reason we have religious schools in Britain is a historical accident. It's how education was formed. In other words, the church was the central educating force because we had an established church, because unlike the French, we did not laicise. What happened was state education was added on top of church education. That's why they exist. But we all know church schools are of radically different kinds. If you're at a Church of England school, you often wouldn't even know it was Christian. On the other hand, many Islamic schools, many Jewish schools, Orthodox Jewish schools, are intensely religious. And so that is a function of those
but going back to the question, just very briefly, because we're running out of time on this, surely it is good if society has evolved in the way that it has. You have to deal with the situation as it is, rather than what some...
Why should the state interfere in the family? Why should the state...
It's a completely different question. No, it's not. No, it's not. All that is being suggested here is that teachers should be allowed to teach that some children have different kinds of parents, and that's not a bad thing. And therefore, presumably, that can alleviate some sort of bullying which might happen later. That can't be a bad thing, can it?
If that is what it really is, I mean, I don't know about you, Ian. I haven't looked at the detail of what was going on in Birmingham.
Well, I have, and the teacher that came up with this syllabus was gay and nominated as one of the 10 best teachers in the world. So that tells me something that he was on the right lines here. But the whole thing has been hijacked by
religion.
A religious grouping.
To be fair to primary schools, from my relatively limited experience, if I look at how my children have been taught, I'm very happy with it, that it's age appropriate. My 5-year-old is being taught about consent in a way that's, if you're patting someone on the head and they don't like it and they ask you to stop, you stop. That's fine, he's 5.
And to be honest, to Lucy's earlier point, I mean, it is a complexity that children are at different stages in their education, and how do we teach a single curriculum? But we have to, and that's the struggle for any subject. It's a struggle for every subject, and I think it's something teachers can rise to.
On that note, which I think we can all agree on, we'll move on. Thank you very much. More of your calls to come. It's 8:47.
This is LBC.
Have you had an operation that has left you with persistent pain around the healed scar? You may feel this pain as burning, aching, shooting, throbbing, or stabbing. At St Pancras Clinical Research, we're looking at a new potential treatment for this pain, which we apply topically. The study will take place in London, and if you volunteer, you'll be paid for your time and reasonable expenses. Find out more at stpancrasclinicalresearch.com. That's stpancrasclinicalresearch.com.
Make the most of the bank holiday at Car Giant. We make car buying easy with over 40 years experience and amazingly low prices on over 6,000 cars in stock. We'll find a car that's right for you and you can drive it home the very same day. Giant choice, giant savings. Car Giant. See the cars and book a test drive now at cargiant.co.uk.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
Think you're tough? Nah, I ain't talking about you, sunshine. I'm talking about your email password. You need to get yourself a strong, separate email password. Something unique, like 3 random words you're not using anywhere else. Because if your email gets hacked, you're in big trouble. Hackers can use it to nick your identity. Then you'll be at the creek without a paddle, and no one wants to see that. Be cyber aware. Learn more at cyberaware.gov.uk.
When it comes to making a PPI claim, you can either do all the work yourself by complaining directly to your lender or the Financial Ombudsman for free, or you can contact the claims guys and get them to do all the donkey work for you. So if you don't have the time or the paperwork, or you're not certain you have PPI, make sure you beat the deadline on the 29th of August 2019 for making new claims by contacting the claims guys. Text ANSWER to 66777. Text ANSWER to 66777 now.
The Claims Guys.
If you started your own furniture store today, you might not call it Fishpools. But if it was $18.99 and your name was Ernest Fishpool, well, it actually was. And he actually did. These days, Fishpools in Waltham Cross is one of the largest furniture stores in the southeast, with a stunning range of on-trend designs. Get up to 30% off in our 120th Big Birthday Sale and see our furniture and home accessories in-store and at fishpools.co.uk. That's a website, Ernest?
At UKME, our chauffeur service is 6-star. Just like the package we offer our drivers. Join the company that treats its drivers like VIPs. Apply today at ukme.co.uk.
Cross Question with Ian Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 to 9 here on LBC. You're listening to Cross Question. Our next question comes from Shuvik, who's in Eltham. Hello, Shuvik.
Hello there, everyone. Yes, I'd like to ask everyone what they think of the government's announcements of porn age checks for those who wish to use pornography online, particularly online.
And this is going to be introduced from July the 15th. As I said earlier, coincidentally my birthday. What a nice birthday present for me. I can imagine my trip down to the newsagent and say, could I have my porn pass, please?
You'll get it gift wrapped, with a little ribbon around it. Large pink ribbon.
David Starkey, in essence, this surely has to be a good idea if it prevents under 18s from looking at porn. But do you think it would?
Probably not. Under 18s are jolly good at getting round rules. It sounds to me like an invitation to fags, behind the bike sheds kind of thing, or underage drinking. I think there's a more serious point, though, Ian, which is this government, under the leadership of the worst Prime Minister in British history, is one that believes in nanny-stating in a completely unconservative way. There is this perpetual attempt at restricting freedom, sometimes on possibly decent grounds. You've given an example, often on specious ones. And in these areas, I'm a fundamental libertarian. I don't think society should be tailored simply to the weak, which is essentially what's being said. Essentially, I am against.
An admirably concise answer.
And simply...
Or maybe not.
Well, just to finish off, I should declare an interest. I quite enjoy pornography.
OK. That's more information than we perhaps needed.
Why not?
Hannah.
No, I don't think it will work. I don't think what they were going for was, by their own admission, something that would stop children from accessing porn. I think it was supposed to act as kind of early deterrent. A lot of children actually stumble across their first porn by accident.
In the hedge, it used to be.
On Daddy's computer, Norman.
So I think it will have some effect there, but no, of course, imposing ID, they will find a way around it. Also, the number of website operators that this will actually apply to is very limited. If you don't have a commercial interest and if it's not more than a third of your content, then it won't apply.
That's part of the problem, isn't it? Because if this only, I think they're doing it to what they call the top 50 porn websites. But that could encourage people to go to the more extreme side of pornography, couldn't it?
I think what the data shows is that people and children are already being drawn to the more extreme side. We're not talking about stumbling across a nude mag here. We're talking about the porn industry micro-targeting young boys from age 11 to get them hooked into soft porn and then upping the climax, quite literally, by introducing more and more aggressive porn. And we're into rape porn, violent scenes to the point where they can no longer become aroused through regular sexual intercourse, and they have no understanding of what women's bodies looks like or respect for those women. This is a really serious issue. We're not talking about a little bit of nudity, and the government's response I don't think will work, but also it is part of this bigger picture of the online harms paper and everything else, where David calls it nanny state, I call it a lack of understanding of technology. The law is so far behind.
Legislation is always 10 years more behind the technology,
but it doesn't have to be. It is entirely possible to work out a legislative framework that can take down and have takedown measures for the most the absolute worst of this pornography that exploits women. There is already legal precedents for dealing with that, but we're actually also talking about a point people quite often overlook. Like 4 companies produce something like over 80% of the world's pornographic content. If you wanted to do something about it, it is perfectly within the government's reach.
Matt, this isn't going to address the problem, is it? Because most 11, we read examples of 8-year-olds that are sharing this kind of material on mobile phones. Well, this isn't going to address that, is it?
No. And I think everyone has their own experience of having found porn early, whether it is in a hedge or an older relatives. I remember a bloke on our street was moving house and left all his magazines in the back garden underneath some army magazines, and a gust of wind basically projected pornography into the air of Nottingham, and this was sort of late 80s, and it was just everywhere. It was kind of comedic looking back, but I think.
And you've never looked back.
I've never looked back. I never underestimate how shocking pornography is to watch. I think it's very hard to remember how I felt. I remember the first time I saw a pornographic magazine. It just seemed so aggressive, even just a nude image. There was something about the tone of the photo. I think it does something to children, and I think you always err on the side of caution. And what's definitely happened is we have not been vigilant enough in stopping highly sexualised imagery, and not just in pornography, but just in the fashion industry, in music videos, on the tube. I'm not a prude at all, and I think amongst consenting adults, fine, but in the public realm, there is so much sexualised content, and I consider myself to be a progressive, I think there is a lot of sexualised content.
Matt talking about the level of violence in that porn, the thing we're missing here is that I think it was 40% of the 13 to 14-year-olds who were accessing this porn said they believed they wanted to replicate that behaviour in real life. And we're coming off the back of a conversation about sex and relationships education. This is what I mean about it being so far behind what's going on.
Lucy, you've mentioned you've got 3 children. You must, as a parent, be really concerned about this.
It's terrifying. I've got 3 boys, and it's completely terrifying to think that the proliferation of really is just properly hardcore porn has the potential to affect what they think a normal sexual relationship, a healthy sexual relationship, could and should look like. And David, I'm with you on liberation and freedom, but I take issue with your point that this is about protecting the weak. Admittedly, I agree with everyone here. I don't think it's going to probably do anything. But we're not talking about protecting the weak. We're talking about protecting children. If you're under 18, you're a child, and actually, if you're viewing this stuff age 8, you're definitely a child. My son is 8. the thought of him seeing this kind of stuff is absolutely horrifying.
Lucy, but the problem, the pass was sold when it was decided by Tim Berners-Lee that there would be no laws on the web. That's what has gone completely wrong. It's replicated the state of nature, which, as we know from Hobbes, is nasty, brutish, and unfortunately long.
When Tim Berners-Lee created the internet, and it was interestingly for founding fathers, for white men who created the internet, he didn't have in mind that there would be images shared through the internet. It was supposed to be a text-based exchange, and at that point women thought this might be liberating, that they would be able to be judged on what they said rather than how they look, and then images took over, and here we are.
We have a final text question, which is rather different to what we've just been discussing. Ben in Ruislip asks, if you had to stockpile one item in the event of a no-deal Brexit, what would it be?
Hardcore pornography.
Thank you very much, Matt Ford. That's your last appearance on Cross Question.
Curry would be mine.
Curry?
I can't live without it. I think it's the best food ever invented.
I wondered what that odour was in the studio this hour.
Oh, man. Curry, absolutely. Curry. Specifically chicken madras, if I can choose a dish.
Is curry going if we Brexit?
Well, you wouldn't have thought it would you? Because, for obvious reasons. But anyway.
I don't know. Vegetables, like we're literally not going to have any vegetables. I think they've said they've got a 3 to 5 day supply of vegetables. That's pretty bad. So I've just been working out.
Grow your own.
Yeah, that's true. I would need a garden to do that.
That's
but
a bit problematic. An allotment, maybe.
Lucy.
Well, is money an object in this?
I don't know.
If money's no object, champagne. It's got to be. Just to stock up for all the celebrated occasions. Or is coffee also maybe if that's in danger, then
I don't think it's grown much in Europe.
No, but if the supply chain is disrupted, that could be problematic.
With some trepidation, I come to you, David Starkey.
It is completely decent, except that it's indecently indulgent. It would be Parma ham and buffalo mozzarella, which is my regular breakfast. And if I were deprived of that, I would be even sharper to Hannah than I've been already, which would be a shocking and a disgrace. So.
Well, there we go. Thank you very much, all four of you. It's been quite an hour. Next week on Cross Quest, we've had a politician-free zone today, but next week, I'm afraid, we're going to revert to type. We will be in the company of Dawn Butler, the Labour MP, Norman Lamb, the Liberal Democrat MP, for the moment anyway, and Alberta